Welcome to episode 105 of the Necronomid.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm probably going to lose some friends today.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. I'm prepared to, maybe get on a couple of people's lists or Reddit pages or whatever, because I'm going to call them exactly what they need to be called.
There you go. I don't know if you noticed, but this movie starts with a P. And anytime that we have a movie that starts with P here on the Necronomid.com, we bring in Shelly Grant. So Shelly, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Done Parasite and Psycho. And now Promising Young Woman.
Yes.
Well, we need to do another silent P.
Yes, I can only come on this podcast and talk about the movies that start with the letter P. So if you want me to talk about something else, it's got to start with a P or I can't come on here.
We'll change the name of the movie for you. It's fine.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and, in case they haven't listened to those episodes, and they should definitely go back and do that because they're both phenomenal.
Yes, thank you. My name is Shelly Grant. I am the co-host of BS Movies podcast. And I believe since the last time I talked to you guys, I've started another podcast called Cine Sirens that I am co-hosting with Andrea Canales, who is the programmer at Film Bar here in Phoenix. And that podcast, she and I challenge each other to watch a movie the other has never seen. And then we have a discourse about those movies. So that one's been a lot of fun. There's 3 episodes available on now where you find a podcast, and that is, again, called Cine Sirens.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See, I'd be great on that show because anyone who listens to this knows that I've apparently never seen a movie before.
Well, part of the reason why we started it is Andrea is stuck in the 70s. She'll only watch stuff from the 70s primarily. So it's really trying to push her beyond, 1980 and on. And then she watches a lot of exploitation stuff that I've never seen. So that's what I've been getting to watch. So it's been fun. It's been fun expanding our movie viewing and education.
So have either of you seen BMX Bandits?
I am sure Andrea has. I have not. That's the one with Nicole Kidman, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I have not seen that, but I'm sure Andrea has. So maybe I'll pitch that to her, something we watch soon, and we'll have you come on, Don.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I would love to, because I think a while ago there was an internet challenge of, what's a movie that you've seen that no one else has seen? And I'm like, the only movie that comes to mind is BMX Bandits.
All right.
Because every time I mention it, somebody's like, what the hell are you talking about? It was this Australian BMX movie where, like, these bank robbers, it was basically Australian Goonies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because Andrea's from New Zealand, so she may have had access to that. So, but yeah, no, I'll definitely pitch that to her, and we'll have you on. And James, if you think of something, you're more than welcome to join us too.
Sweet. I can't help but notice that you just said exploitation movies, and that plays very heavily into what we're talking about today.
Yes.
So I have a little bit of a rant that I want to talk about, but first I want to ask you, having been watching this, how did it affect your viewing of this film? Like, I'm going to talk in a minute about how I think a lot of people went down the rape revenge structure with this, and then were either disappointed or were only okay with it. And that's because I don't believe that it is a rape revenge film. Mm-hmm. But did it set you up to expect that as well? Like, were you more expecting that because you've been seeing some of this stuff, or like, did it not affect your viewing at all, or whatever?
I don't think it did, because I agree with you. I don't view this as a rape revenge movie in that sense. And so, again, we'll get into this of possibly losing some friends. I don't, some of the critiques I've heard of it is like, it didn't push it far enough like some exploitation movies. And I don't view it that way.
Yeah.
I view this sort of in a very satirical sense of sort of John Hughes-esque 80s romantic comedies with sort of housed in trauma, if that makes sense. So yeah. I think because of the trauma that the movie addresses, I think then people are expecting it's going to be, especially if they've seen exploitation movies like Miss 45, they're expecting it's going to go this route, and it very much doesn't. And so I think I kind of viewed it with the way it looks, with sort of the bubblegum pop one-hit wonders and the colors of the movie that are just so... A candy color is the word I keep going. It's like you're walking into Willy Wonka's factory with everything just so bright and pink and bubblegum pinks and blues, that it kind of makes you almost forget, in a sense, what this movie is going to be. You're almost viewing, like I said, sort of an 80s John Hughes teen movie. Where I think it definitely satirizes that, sort of akin to American Psycho is a satire of 80s yuppie-dom and excess.
Right.
Yeah, I told my wife that it looked like a Katy Perry video.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, I saw a whole lot of people online who were more or less expecting a rape revenge film, as I said. And I feel instead, this is just a trauma piece. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the entire structure of this film is social commentary. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, in life, we have expected rules. We have, if you rape someone, you should go to jail. This should happen, blah, blah, fucking blah, because it doesn't. Right. This is a really hard topic for me. I spent 4 years as a case manager for women in domestic violence situations, and I've listened to way more rape stories than I ever wanted to. Not that I wanted to, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is just a very hard topic for me. But I feel like what this movie does is it is a true symbolism of the life of a woman.
Yes.
It is not the genre you want it to be. It is every genre. Because every one of us lives in a rom-com, and every one of us lives in horror, and every one of us lives in trauma and drama and whatever else, and every one of us lives in a stand-up comedy, So this movie pulls it off by every one of these fucking genres being here, because that's what life is. And so when I look at critics and I see, well, rape revenge movies did this better. Well, this isn't one. And it's not a rom-com, and it's not a romance story, right? And injecting that expectation makes you not like the film as much. Mm-hmm. I went into it without that because I do read spoilers, right? Everybody who listens to this show knows I read spoilers. And what that allowed me to do was really appreciate what it is instead of what I wanted it to be.
Right.
Anything with this topic is never going to be what any of us want it to be. And when we say exploitation movies did it better, okay, that's great. Except in real life, you don't get to just get angry and go find a knife and carve up the 3 dudes that raped you.
Right.
And you don't get to live, I spit on your grave. And you shouldn't have to, number one. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
Rape revenge movies are made for the male gaze. We almost always get the actual rape, and we don't get that in this, and we don't fucking need it in this.
Right. Nope.
I think it's worse that we don't get it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my imagination. I don't know. But what this does for me instead is we just get the everlasting trauma that she has when it wasn't even her.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that is fucking huge, because if you look at these exploitation movies and these rape revenge movies, either A, I spit on your grave, so you get raped and then you attack and you seek vengeance. Or you have the Last House on the Left route where you die and someone else seeks vengeance, right? Mm-hmm. What this does is someone else seeks vengeance, but she did it, in my opinion, more because no one else would.
Right.
She doesn't immediately seek revenge. And that's always huge in these fucking films, right? But in this one, it's years later. And even when she left college or whatever else, all of this is, she's always giving people the chance. And then when they don't take it, her having revenge is the last resort.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry this is going so long, but basically what I'm thinking with this structure type is it's exactly what women have to deal with. It's the trauma that never goes away, whether it's you, whether it's your best friend, whether it's somebody Harvey Weinstein fucked up, whatever. It's all women. And rape revenge movies are always individualized.
Right.
And when it's individualized, you can fix it and you can seek revenge and you can find the one person who's responsible. Because if you look at those films, the rapist is always a truly bad person with no redeeming qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And then dad or brother or whoever is this great stand-up man who's the direct opposite. Mm-hmm. And that's not real.
No.
Real is this whole spectrum in between, right?
Right.
And my final point with that is these men who are supposedly so good were always going out to avenge virginity and almost never because their daughter or sister was killed. That bugs the fuck out of me with exploitation films.
Right.
This is 100%. She was there for her friend, and then her friend dies later.
Mm-hmm.
And then years after that, she's finally realized nothing's going to happen unless I do it.
Right.
And that's why none of this fits what they wanted and why they don't like this film. That's just my opinion. They can bring it on. Will knows where to find me. No.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Will. All right. So, Shelly, I know you mentioned like the colors and that kind of stuff. Why don't you take us through that as well as her appearance? Because I feel like she's symbolic of how women are expected to still look a certain way and carry on a certain way, no matter what they're feeling inside. Would you like to speak to that? Sure.
So even going to taking it before the colors, but even the title, Promising Young Woman, the director, Emerald Fennell, took that term from the Brock Turner case, who was this college dude who took advantage, sexually abused, assaulted a young woman while she was passed out drunk. And part of the reason why they gave him a lighter sentence was he was a promising young man, and they did not want to ruin his life for this one bad decision he made, even though the victim of that crime now has to carry this trauma with her for the rest of her life. But we'll get into all that. So yeah, Fennell takes that term that actually comes from those court transcripts of he's a promising young man and calls this promising young woman. And we are introduced to our main character, Cassie, played by Carey Mulligan, who is absolutely brilliant. I love her. I think she was fantastic in this. Where we meet her in a bar. That's the opening scene, right? I just watched it yesterday. Meet her in a bar. Well, actually, I'll take it back a step further. That I found it interesting that the opening sequence is you are in a nightclub and they're showing the guys dancing.
I loved that.
Which typically in a quote unquote typical movie, you're going to see the girls dancing in the bar with their midriffs and asses and everything shaking around. Where it's obviously these guys that have just gotten off work dancing around in sort of this slow-mo way to the pop song Boys, which is a great song. And so, yeah, then you're introduced to, you see these three guys talking at the bar, Adam Brody, Sam Richardson, and I'm not sure who the other actor is, but Adam Brody and Sam Richardson especially, is like a comedic actor. He's in comedy shows on Comedy Central. Adam Brody was on the OC, but has also been known for his comedy work. And of course, being on the OC, he was the quote unquote good guy. So you see these familiar faces we know.
Mm-hmm.
And then we meet Cassie, the main character, who is sitting by herself in this bar and is quite inebriated and goes through the motions. And the Adam Brody character, decides, I'm going to be the good guy. I'll go over and help her.
Right.
And, through these machinations of them introducing, he's like, well, here, I'll, where are you going? She's lost her phone. I'll get you an Uber, you can share it with me. And then, oh my gosh, hey, my apartment's right here. Why don't you come up for a little bit? So you see exactly where this is going. And am I getting too into this right now, guys?
Or no. This is good. This is great.
Okay. So, they go up to his apartment. He offers her more liquor. And it's really interesting when he pours, which it was like kumquat liquor. So obviously thinking she's a chick, she's not going to want whiskey. Like, I'm going to give her this. He obviously keeps that there. Just like, I think there's another movie that's like all girls love schnapps.
Wow.
He keeps this very sweet liqueur there to keep her drunk, but then obviously, like, he's not drinking this himself, right? But he pours just this huge pour for her, and he barely has any in his glass. Hands this to her, barely takes a sip, and then, of course, he's like, well, maybe you should lay down. And he lies her down on his bed and then begins to take advantage of her. And she's kind of doing the, oh, what are you doing? Sort of sounding in this drunken state. And then she sits up very sober and says, what are you doing? And he is like, oh, wait, no, it's fine, and just, and then of course it turns into, oh my God, you crazy bitch, get out of my apartment. What are you doing? What are you doing? So, that's our introduction to Cassie, who then we see walking home, and it's just her feet. And then as they pan up her body, then, you see she was wearing a white blouse. She's got some blood on, or what looks to be blood. And you're kind of thinking like, oh shit, did she kill this guy? Kind of getting back to the exploitation point, because that's something maybe we expect.
Mm-hmm.
There's some satisfaction here. It's like, oh, she's just going out and killing these dudes. No, as it continues to pan up, she's eating a hot dog with loads of ketchup on it. So the ketchup's just dripping all over her.
I would like to point out that that's symbolism for a bloody dick. Just saying.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Oh, you English majors.
Absolutely, it is.
So, two things really fast. I want to point out one thing, just because I'm going to forget this later in the episode.
Sure.
When you first see her, and it's that shot that's in all the trailers. She's on the red couches.
Yes.
And she's almost in a crucified position.
Yes.
Right? Like she's got her arms out. Her head's hanging low.
Yes.
And this is that martyr symbolism that we're going to get so much of. And there's a ton of wings and different angel wing kind of things and different stuff like that. But this shot is also so good because while it gives you this Jesus-like martyr thing, which is the most vulnerable and most powerful position ever, right?
Right.
And while we get that, we also get this girl who appears to be out cold and pops her head up.
Yes.
And that's the tip that's coming after this. And I love that. I'm going to forget that later. So I had to.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because as I launched into my synopsis there, I kind of skimmed past the positioning of her, which is, you're right. Just excellent. But as she's eating
construction guys.
Yeah, she gets to the construction guys who began catcalling her. They're like, oh, walk of shame, honey. And, typically, as I shouldn't say all women, but in my experience as a woman, there was a certain idea for me and collectively as women, and this could just be women that are at my age who are past their 40s, of like, you go along to get along, or you just ignore that. So I think if it was me in that situation, those guys catcalling, I would have just kept walking, which I think in some ways that's what men that do that expect you to do. That's become sort of the social contract of that behavior, is that I'm going to say this, but she's just going to ignore me and move on. And it's not a big deal.
Whoa. And you're telling me that the point of catcalling isn't that you think she's going to react well and you're going to start a relationship today?
Well, maybe that is the point. I don't know. But
that's how I got married. Isn't that the way it was supposed to? That's the way it's supposed to work.
Oh,
well, okay. Let me say this real quick. There was a friend of mine on Twitter was commenting, I guess, some guy or guys, because it wasn't just one person, had messaged her like 12 times. And her question on Twitter was, he was like, if a guy, any guys out there, like, do you get ashamed of yourselves after you DM a girl 12 times and there's no response?
Right.
And my immediately, I responded back to her. I said, no. I said, he's sitting there. He's like, oh, here comes number 13. Guaranteed she's going to respond. Right. And I think that's what a lot of guys are unfortunately taught, or previously had been taught, which was just keep show her that you're persistent. Show her that, she's got your attention, because, eventually you can wear her down and she'll go out on a date with you, or she'll do this. And I remember so many movies from the 70s and 80s, not to mention movies from the 50s and 60s, from the 70s and 80s, where that was the standard way that we would put into the movie, which was, okay, this girl said no, but no doesn't really mean no. It means try harder.
Right.
Or this girl you've never talked to in high school goes to this one college, which I can't remember the name of the movie, gets accepted to this one college. You've never talked to her. So your thing is, go to that same college and profess your love to her.
Yes.
So stalk the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Go to the same college, and then she's going to fall in love with you.
Obviously.
Yeah.
How else would you do it?
Yeah. So there is this, there's these social expectations that we have that have been given to us by movies and television and everything. And what Cassie does, though, instead of just walking on and ignoring these guys, or even just turning around and telling them to fuck off, she stops and she stares at them and continues to eat her bloody dick metaphor. And and just stares them down, which I just love so much. And then those guys are like, what are you doing? And she just continues to stare. And they're finally like, oh my God, she's a crazy bitch. What? Stop doing that. And they run off. Mm-hmm. So she, of course, takes that power away from them just by her sort of attitude. And it's just a great introduction then to her. Even though at this point we're not sure what exactly she's doing. We know, we've seen her do this in the bar. So it's setting her up that, okay, but we don't know a lot about her. And then we become more introduced to her, because then she goes home. She's keeping a book of all of these times she does this. And it's this little notebook that is dog-eared and worn and has so many of these incidences. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking to yourself, well, is is she trying to find the good guy? Because obviously this has happened so many times, she's been let down every time. The quote unquote nice guy winds up taking advantage of her, or tries to take advantage of her.
I thought it was weird, when I first saw the notebook, because I was like, if you're killing that many people, you're definitely getting caught, right?
Yeah.
But you can't teach people something if you kill them. And I think that's the power of this film, is she's constantly giving them chances, and she's constantly trying to teach them, right? I mean, she's Jigsaw. That's what I'm trying to say. And no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But no, but even the supposed good guy that we're going to get to in a bit, he's going to the same bar as everyone else once his date doesn't work out.
Right.
And I don't know, there's something about this notebook that is, at once disturbing and reassuring to me, because it's disturbing as fuck that she does this every single weekend and puts another notch on there, maybe up to 3. Maybe she goes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's hard to say how long she's been doing this. But the reassuring part to me is that she's not wrong. She's not just crazy and overreacting.
Right.
And really, she's not hurting anybody but herself. She keeps cutting her own traumatic wound open and keeping the pain. But outside of that, she's not harming these guys. They're kicking her out once she's too crazy for them or whatever. She's just fucking with people.
Yes.
And so there's nothing really wrong with what she's doing at all. And I think that is a great setup.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And then, we're introduced to her. She works at this coffee shop. And this is really where these candy colors come in, because she's always dressed. She's very blonde. She's always dressed in like pinks and blues and just these very soft, feminine pastel colors. She works at this coffee shop that also has that sort of look to it too. And then, she has this darkness, because I love that first interaction at the coffee shop when we meet Gail, her boss, played by Laverne Cox, who is also amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And that, the Visco girl comes in and is like, hey, can I get a coffee? And like, she just ignores her and just like keeps talking to Gail. And then the girl like interrupts again. She's like, can I get a coffee? And she just looks at her and says, no. And the girl walks out. I'm just like, I just love that so much.
Well, and that's another thing that I like about this. Her targeting is always about the individual. It's not targeting men. It's not targeting women. Every single interaction she has in this film is individualized to somebody who made a choice.
Yeah.
And my feeling with this girl is she's like, kind of like, you're part of the problem. So no, fuck off. Get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Going back to her appearance and the pinks and the blonde hair and the eyelashes and everything else. I also noticed, like, when she goes to the bar the night that she stands up, what's his name? The guy she's dating?
Oh, Ryan. That she stands up Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah, when she stands up Ryan and then she goes to the bar and picks up a dude, she's wearing all black. And that was interesting to me, how this darker side comes out, and it's very evident by what she's wearing, but it also fits what she's doing. When she's going about daily life, she's presenting this positive, beaming thing that you're supposed to present, even though her personality is doing the opposite.
Right.
And she's being herself. But when she goes to the club, it is 100% what would you expect me to be instead of who am I? And I thought that was such a nice touch to throw in there.
Well, and especially, I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
I was going to say that scene in particular, when she's going home with, I guess when she's leaving the club with Paul.
Yes.
And, she runs into Ryan on the way out, and then Paul figures out who she is. And he's like, oh, wait a second, you're sober? And that's his reaction, as opposed to, oh my God, you know this guy? Oh, is this your boy? It's not a reaction where, if I were leaving a club with a girl or a woman, if I were leaving the club with someone and someone else recognized them and their first response was like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing with that guy? I'm like, oh, this is your boyfriend. Oh, okay, well, let me get the hell out of here. I didn't know. His reaction is, you're sober, which is so telling about what's going on. But then when he figures out who she is, his response says, he's like, oh, you're that crazy bitch that so-and-so was telling me about. You're not even that hot, which one, that's very bold for him to say. Yeah. In that sense, as far as the defense mechanism. But her response is just great, because she says, you know what? You're not exactly dropping panties yourself.
Yeah.
The fact that you have to be a predator at this point. But it gets into this one criticism that I saw from an interview, and I think it was directly with Carey Mulligan, where someone in the press commented or asked her, how do you think the movie would have done or been received if it had been played? Excuse me, if your role had been played by somebody like Margot Robbie? And what it got to was this whole idea that
thing to say.
Yeah, in many ways, it that warrants 2 hot dogs. But the idea that somehow Carey Mulligan is not attractive enough to warrant, the idea that she could be sexual prey for someone. And it goes into larger issues or larger aspects of sexual assault, which, people have used in court cases, police investigating rapes and sexual assault, judges when they were rendering, decisions from the bench as far as whether or not to pursue the case or at least determine that the case had any merit, processing rape kits. There are hours upon hours of video of interactions between attorneys and victims where it's, are you sure, are you sure guys weren't friends? And, or even getting into the attractiveness of the woman or the man who was assaulted and arguing that this person couldn't have assaulted you because you weren't attractive enough.
Right.
And that reporter who asked that question ended up starting a conversation, whether they meant to or not, about the ignorance around this idea of sexual assault or the idea of stalking or just the idea of what a victim is, where the level of attractiveness or perceived attractiveness is not something that pushes somebody into doing this. And I shouldn't even say they're choosing to do it. That causes somebody to choose to assault someone. And I found that as a great thing to already have in the film, where there is this moment where he's like, well, you're not even that hot.
Right.
Okay, fucker, you were taking her home because you thought she was drunk, about to pass out, could barely walk. If this wasn't about attractiveness, this was about something else for you. This was about you pursuing someone, pouncing on them, and adding your own notches.
Right.
Which gets into all aspects of, so many aspects of toxic masculinity. It even goes back to when you were bringing up Brock Turner, which was, oh, this is my shot. This is my chance to have some, or at least to take somebody and do X, Y, and Z. And thankfully, the 2 students who saw this stopped him from committing the act or stopped him from continuing on. But I would have loved to have seen a headline that says, champion swimmer gets beaten to death after raping a girl.
Yeah.
His hot dog is lying over there next to the dumpster.
Yes. I agree, because that scene I think is great because it calls back, because the Paul is Sam Richardson, who is in that first scene with Adam Brody. He's Adam Brody's buddy. So yeah, he even says that. He was like, oh my God, you're that crazy one. My buddy told me. So he doesn't even remember what that chick looked like that, his buddy took home that night who did this to him, and I love how she, you're no panty dropper yourself, Paul, is such a great line. Anyway, it's such a great line. And when she's like, well, I'm not the only one who does this.
Right.
You better be careful, and he was like, oh, you're lying. And she was like, okay, well, find out.
Yeah. There's some lady going around with a knife and.
Yes. Yeah. She's got a pair of scissors and she just looks down, and the interesting thing, I don't know if we brought this up and I don't even know if this is the appropriate place to talk about this, but the movie itself never brings up the words rape or sexual assault. So this is all like, we're smart people. We know what's happening, but I do think it's interesting that that's the choice that is made, because that's obviously a very clear choice by the screenwriter, Emerald Fennell, that we're not going to bring these words into it.
Right. So, well, I'm glad you bring that up, because even with that, there's that argument when that discussion where it's the worst fear, right? Yes. And I can't remember who it was, it might have been Al who brings it up, but that idea of, oh, this is every guy's worst fear, being accused of rape, and her response is, "What do you think every woman's?" And he doesn't say rape, but you know, this is every guy's worst fear, and her response is, "What do you think every woman's worst fear is?"
Correct.
And that got it. And even through this, right? All those guys that we see Cassandra with, or at least, where she is preying upon them to determine whether or not they're actually remorseful or actually going to be a nice guy or a good guy, as opposed to just saying that they're a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
You see that so many times where their big fear is like, oh shit, you were awake, you were sober, you weren't high, you were totally conscious of all this stuff that was going on. And if I had done something, I probably would have gone to jail. So their fear is not anything about, oh, I would have made the wrong choice, I could have hurt somebody, I would have done this. It's, oh shit, you weren't high, you weren't drunk. Even with Kavanaugh, whatever the hell his name is, or Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein or any number of people that we could point to and say, Kevin Spacey, all these moments where somebody says, oh, well, you're going to be ruining their career if this happens. And no one ever asks, what about ruining somebody's life by actually committing that act? I don't give a shit about it. If I were to have, and this is me, if I were to have someone from my past or someone from my present come up and say, this guy made me uncomfortable, or he said this, or, somebody accuses me of something, I want them to be heard, because you know what? Even if they're wrong, even if it turns out this was somebody who was making it up, there are people out there who are afraid to come forward because they're going to be taken as though they're making it up or what's going on, right? Because so many other people have shut them down. And you see this in this movie where everybody at every level shut this investigation down.
Yeah.
The dean of the college, the attorney that talks about like, hey, we were paid to dig up dirt on all these girls.
Right.
And the old days,
and paid bonuses for settling or not getting convictions. Yeah.
It's like all we had to do now is go on the internet. And I think that's such bullshit, because when I was a teacher in the secondary level, I saw this firsthand, how seriously schools did not take girls' claims of being just being uncomfortable.
Yep.
A boy snaps her bra and it becomes, oh, it's just horseplay. It's just playing around. I'm like, no, bullshit. Like, why is this okay? I had one student who, she was like apoplectic, just having a breakdown in the middle of the lunchroom. And I pulled her aside and said, what's going on? She's like, these boys on the football team have been saying X, Y, and Z with me. I slept with one, and now they're all saying that they slept with me. And now all these rumors are going around school. I walked this young lady in to report it. And I was immediately told, well, we've heard that girl's a little fast. And my response was, I don't give a shit what you've heard.
Yeah.
Like, what does that matter? But again, this was a school that competed for state football championship every year. So they couldn't bear to have anybody tarnish the name of the football team.
Right.
Can I just add really fast? I've had, unfortunately, quite a few friends in my life who wrote themselves off even as I've hooked up with too many people, so no one should believe me.
Right.
Fuck that. I believe you way faster than someone who never ever talks about it, because I've had those instances where a girl slept with someone and regretted it and then made something up, right? And it was a girl who never talked about it. But the girls who hooked up with everyone, or whatever you want to call it, I believe them more, because you've never said this about anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And maybe that's not the best way to look at it, but it's how my brain works. And I just wanted to throw out that, it's like the stupidest fucking defense to me. I don't know.
Sure. Because we as a society, we blame women.
Yes.
For sexual interactions, right? Whether it's consensual or not.
Or for not having sexual interactions.
Well, but I mean, as far as if they have sex, it's they were too fast, or they were too open, or they're supposed to save themselves, or whatever types of narratives are thrown out there, right? But if they have non-consensual sex, which is better known as rape,
right?
They're then blamed for you were wearing this, you were out late, you were drinking, you know, you probably sent the wrong signals. Well, you know, you slept over at his house. So what was he supposed to expect? Or, you know, my favorite old one, right? Which is not necessarily sexual assault, but not full consent. And I want to explain it this way. The expectation that's placed on women where you might not have fully wanted to engage in sex or any type of sexual act with someone, but you felt guilted into it.
Yes.
By, well, you know,
he paid for dinner.
If you eat from this side of the menu, you know what that means.
Yeah.
So if they do it, it's kind of like, well, I didn't know. He said he was taking me out to dinner, and you get home, and my favorite comedic version of it is from Seinfeld, where they go out to dinner, and she's like, "Oh, we had such a nice time," and then she looks down and she sees that he's already pulled his penis out, like in the cab or the car, and so she goes to her friends and is like, he took it out." And like, what are you talking about? It's like, he took it out. I guess he expected because we went to dinner, this was okay. Now they turned it into a funny thing because nothing happened aside from this guy exposing himself. But imagine, and I'm saying for me as a man, imagine how many women that they don't talk about that, or there is this feeling of, oh, I felt good. Because even what's her Stormy Daniels, when she was talking about her moment with Trump, she was like, I felt as though I put myself in this situation. So that's why I had sex with him. I went up to his room. We talked. I go to the bathroom. I come out of the bathroom and he's got his pants down. So I thought to myself, like, oh, shit, Stormy, you put yourself in here and that's what he's expecting. And so she, had sex. She was like, it didn't take that long, but But, I felt bad as though I had to do this. And the complaints against her were, well, she's a porn actress. So, that's all her life is about. I'm like, I don't give a shit if she had a sign that said Boner Garage, because I've seen that meme that said Boner Garage. She's standing out, outdoors with her pants off. That doesn't mean you can come on up to her and try anything.
Absolutely.
And even if you are engaged in it and she says stop, guess what, fellas? That fucking means stop.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how far along you are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean like, hey, just give me 2 more seconds and I'll be done. No, if she's to stop at that moment, just get the fuck up and out.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you're married to her or anything else. Like,
thank you, because that's
there's literally no lines. No is no, and I know why, but it bothers me that people work so hard to find exceptions, and there aren't any.
Well, and speaking as a woman, like there's all these contradictions. Like you brought up the Seinfeld thing, Don. There's also that episode. I know James is going to roll his eyes now, but I think Don's the big fan of The Office, and James.
Oh, I was waiting. I didn't want to reference that episode. I know where you're going.
There's the episode of The Office where Pam's going on the date and Stanley and Phyllis are giving her advice. And Stanley is like, oh, get the lobster. And Phyllis is like, well, if you get the lobster, you're going to have to put out. Stanley says that. And Phyllis, Pam looks to Phyllis and kind of rolls her eyes. And Phyllis is like, oh, no, you're going to have to put out.
You're going to have to put out.
And so, there is that sort of then expectation. Because then I thought it was interesting. Getting back to Promising Young Woman, I think it's interesting that, and this goes into this contradiction of women of looking sexy, but then not putting out. And so like when she's doing her makeup before she goes out with McLovin and she's watching a blowjob tutorial.
Right.
To have blowjob lips. So there's these makeup tutorials. And so, it's to make your lips look inviting so you can have the privilege of giving somebody a blowjob. It just is, again, goes to this thing of women. It was like, well, you looked too sexy. You were too attractive. But, and what are these mixed signals that then are coming to young women of how to navigate that and say no. And I think one of the biggest things that needs to be taught to girls sort of, and hopefully this ended with my generation of getting back to like the going along to get along, or as my Southern grandmother would always tell me, to be sweet. That it's, I think it's hard for women to just say no, period, and not offer some kind of excuse.
Right.
So if a guy asks you out, which is why then perpetuates this idea of them just wanting to pursue, instead of just saying, no, I don't want to go out with you, the idea of being sweet then comes into play of like, then it's like, no, I have to wash my hair Saturday night.
Right.
No, I already have plans. No, I'd like to, but
I'm babysitting.
Yes. And then it becomes all these excuses. And it's like, why isn't it okay for just a girl, a woman, to say no, period, and not offer? He doesn't need an excuse.
No.
You just say no. And I think as a woman, that's very difficult for us to do. And hopefully, I know you guys are both fathers of young daughters, so please implore your wives and teach your girls that saying no is just fine.
I'm taking mine back to farmland in Nebraska, and we're going to learn to castrate pigs.
There you go.
No reason.
Yeah, I was going to say I started a dick cutting tutorial last year, which is I told my daughter, I was like, look, I don't care who it is, and this is one of those things that I don't want to come off as one of those guys like, I only care because I have a daughter. No, I care because I'm a human being, and I actually as a man, I should be a whole lot better. And even when I hear people I know who say shit that's not okay, I fucking let them know. I'm like, that sounds a little rapey, dude.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've had that conversation, and mind you, she's 6. She's going to be 7 later this month. But I've had that conversation with her. I'm like, no one has a right to touch your body. No one has a right to be in your space.
Yep.
Anybody who is anywhere near you and you feel uncomfortable, I said, even me, do not feel as though you need to care about my feelings.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's probably been maybe a week and a half that since she's given me a kiss goodnight. So, you know, she'll give her mom a kiss goodnight. I'm like, oh, you know, come here, give me a kiss goodnight. She's like, no. I was like, oh, okay. All right, good night. Because I don't want her to ever feel as though she has to do something because of the proximity she has to someone else.
Yep.
Right.
And I've informed all of her grandparents the same thing. I'm like, if she doesn't want to give you a kiss, she ain't giving you a kiss.
Right.
It's not that way. I mean, if you want to blow her a kiss, great. But this kid is in charge of her own body. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that I'm starting to see how we're reverting a little bit, because I'm seeing some people who are making that argument, and maybe it's just the region I'm in right now, that are making that argument that, you know, well, you know, it's okay, you know, it's just this, or it's just family, or it's just whatever it is. And, you know, I have to still push back and say, like, no, it's still not okay. I don't give a shit. Like,
well, because I think it's important to teach people, but especially girls, to listen to that inner whatever it is, that if they feel uncomfortable, if something feels off, then go with that. That's a gift to you.
Right.
That is your body's way of telling you something's wrong and to get out.
Right.
And so, so if somebody, you know, wants a hug, or again, as my Southern family would say, give me some sugar, which would mean to give them a kiss. Mm-hmm. You know, if something feels off, if that feels uncomfortable, then yes, then I should have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, and especially with bodies, I always forget to mention this, because there's still people who don't know this. I mean, this is the end of the school year. So if you're a teacher or in an education program and you're going into a new year, a new school or whatever, don't hug the little boys.
Yeah.
I'm saying as a female teacher, don't hug the boys, because those little boys are fucking perverts.
Yep.
And I had a good number of junior teachers when I was teaching. The boys would go to like the new hot teacher or the teacher they thought was hot or whatever, or the teacher that had the biggest boobs. Mm-hmm. And they would go and say, "Oh, Miss Smith, can I have a hug?" And the teacher felt obligated because of the way things were or had been for so long. "Oh, it's just one of my students, it's one of my kids who wants a hug." And I would see these kids go, "I could feel her nipple. Oh man, I could feel her boobs." And I'm like, and so I would go to them and I would say, "Be careful. I mean, shake their hands, give them high five, pound a fist or whatever." And I said, "But don't hug them." And like, "Well, it doesn't mean anything." It's like, no. They're trying to touch your boobs. Yeah. And they think they can get away with it. And so they do the same thing with the girls in the school where it's like, "Oh, where's my hug?" And they hug them and they get a little close. And it becomes that same thing of, "Oh, I'm trying to touch her and cross that boundary with, and under the guise of I'm being cool, I'm being nice." And I'll go tell my friends like, "Oh, Katie's boobs are like this," or Sarah's boobs like this. And then it turns into this ridiculous rumor about, "Oh, he got to grab her boobs or got to see her boobs," or anything like that. But yeah, when I first got exposed, I was like, "What the fuck? These kids are horrible." Yeah. and the thing is, somebody taught them that was the trick.
Sure. Yeah. Somebody figured it out. There was an older brother or somebody. Yeah. So, so now Cassie's got her blowjob lips, and our next person is McLovin.
I prefer to think of him as the motherfucker.
Oh, true. He's definitely that. So it's another guy that, she's gone home with, and he is just desperately trying to get her high, like to the point of like trying to get her to snort cocaine, and she like blows it out, and then he like puts it on his finger and just rubs it all along her gums and everything. It's so gross.
Nothing weird about that.
Nothing weird about that. And he's, of course, talking about this book and sort of, how challenging it is to be a man. Right. This love story that, you just can't find a good woman, and it's just so hard. And, he's telling her about this. And, of course, when she turns the tables, I just love that. When she turns the tables and she's like, "Well, here, let me ask you a few questions." And she's like, "What do I do for a living?"
Well, because he says this line that is so overused in daily life. And I loved that they went here. He says, "I thought we had a connection."
Yes. And so then, she turns that right back on him, and just like, "Well, what do I do for a living?" And he just like panic. And she goes, "Okay, well, maybe that's too hard." And then just lessens it finally to where she was like, "Okay, what's my name?"
What a moment.
And then he just is like, "I'm a nice guy." Then becomes his whole, other guys would have done this. And so I think it's that, you mentioned this earlier where you have this spectrum, right? You have the very clear bad guy, right? But then in between, and then you have on the other end the nice guy, but then in between you sort of have these nuances of these guys who think they are nice, but then because of their privilege feel like they can do this and take advantage. And then of course he just turns it on her, and I love, she just doesn't let him go, where she was like, "But a few moments ago you had your fingers inside me and you said we had a connection." Right.
I love how matter of fact she is about it. That's what's so wonderful about it too.
Right. And again, it subverts that expectation that men aren't expecting women to come back at them in such a way.
Right.
And so frankly, and so directly. And so the fact that she then becomes that direct with him, is really great. But then now I want to talk about her interaction with Dean Walker, because I think that's really interesting.
Oh my God. That was probably one of the best ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really fast, right before you go there, I just want to throw in one more thing about nice guys. There is one nice guy in this film, and it's her dad.
Yes.
And I would argue her mom.
Brown, who is classically a bad guy in movies.
Wasn't that great?
Yes.
And the fact that he's married to Stifler's mom just made me so happy. But anyway, so and then her mom is one of the truly nice women in this. Same with Nina's mom, right?
Yes.
But all three of these parents have the same thing in common, and that's that as nice as they are, as wonderful as they are, as much as they want the best for her, they want her to fucking forget it and move on.
Right.
Yes.
And that once again feeds into all of the society expectations and all of the shit that isn't helpful in the slightest bit. So I just wanted to throw in that even the one nice guy doesn't have her best interests in mind.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Shelly, but
you're good.
But even with that, I can kind of understand Stanley is his name, or Clancy Brown's character's name in the film. I can kind of understand that because if you're talking about a different generation, and I'm not saying a generation is an excuse, but I think for him, he may not have known the full situation, but then not knowing how it fully affected his daughter to really understand what it meant for her, other than this bad thing happened to her friend in college. She's been dealing with it. And for them, I think for them, it was an aspect of moving on, because I had a conversation like this with a family member recently. And he was stating, like, you know, he didn't have time when he was younger to focus on all the trauma and all the bad stuff that happened to him, because he was working all the time. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have that opportunity to
also just might not have understood it at that point.
Right. And that was the other thing, you know, focusing on the things that were going on and then really understand how those things affected him. So looking at Stanley or even looking at Susan, the parents, I can kind of understand that generationally, if you're looking at them possibly going to school in the 70s or the 80s, as far as college, something like what had happened to Nina might not have been talked about in the same way, and they might not have that same understanding if they even know the full situation as to what she faced.
Absolutely,
to even know how to deal with it as adult parents of adults.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't mean to imply that they like didn't care.
Oh no, I didn't.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure.
No.
I think the point is that their generation's thinking, okay, well, you've just got to let this go and move on. Right. And they're not understanding what to do with her because she can't move on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, as the movie goes along, you know, you see Cassie as she is going out to the clubs and picking up these dudes, but then also she begins this plan of methodically going after the people that were directly involved in what happened with Nina. And one of the first ones is with the dean of the school where they were both in college. Dina and Cassie were in med school. Mm-hmm. And she makes an appointment under the guise of like coming back. And so we see her go in and meet with Dean Walker, played by Connie Britton, who is fantastic as well. Like the whole cast is just great. Who we all know from like Friday Night Lights. And so she's a friendly, familiar face to us. And they begin to talk, and she tells kind of a little vague at first of who exactly she is. And then she brings up Nina. And of course, the dean doesn't remember Nina, but as soon as she brings up Al, who is the rapist, she was like, oh, he's so great. He just came back and did a speech. And so clearly remembers Al. And so then that proves to Cassie that this person doesn't even remember my friend who went through this horrible experience. Mm-hmm. And goes in, and then the dean says all the things, you know, sort of we've already talked about. She was like, well, I'm not going to ruin this young man's life. It was a he said, she said. You know, Nina did have a lot to drink that night, and Cassie comes back at her like, oh, so it was her fault.
Right.
You know, and she's like, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. So then Cassie tells the dean, she's like, well, Okay, well, I'm glad to hear you say that because, yes, we do need to believe the boys. And I met your daughter and I took her to the room Nina was in, and she's in there with some boys right now. And of course, the dean's face just falls and she's like, you tell me where she is. It immediately turns. Where's my daughter? How dare you? Just really freaks her out.
Right.
And Cassie just lets her go and has this meltdown. And kind of makes the point of like, well, it's different when it's someone you love. Now it matters. Now you're going to remember.
I love how she's fucking with her with the,
for sure.
She's in the room that Nina was in.
Yes.
Because then the dean's like, tell me where she is. And she's like, I did. I told you. She's in the room that Nina was in.
Yes.
Like, so great. But yeah, the fact that she literally goes to the high school and picks up this woman's daughter.
Yes.
And she takes her to a restaurant and leaves her there, you know, like she's not in any real danger. I mean, it's still, this is one of my big problems with the film. One of my two big problems. This is still a 100% an arrestable. This is something that she did that's actually wrong. And I refuse to believe that the dean wouldn't have followed up legally on this. I just don't. This is so fucked up. You literally picked up someone's daughter at their school and took them somewhere. That's kidnapping, whether you had any intention of hurting her or not. I have an issue that there's no follow-up here at all. There's no reason for the dean not to have followed up. That bothers me, but I'm willing to overlook it.
Yeah.
But the true beauty is you don't care until it personally affects you.
Right.
And that's, anyone who follows me on social media knows that's one of my biggest pet peeves in life. So
because then that goes back to, you know, the point Dawn was making earlier of like caring, you know, men all of a sudden caring because they have daughters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like, well, no, you should care because you're human and we're all going through this human experience together. Because that was one of the things I remember when the Weinstein stuff came out, you know, Matt Damon's statement was like, as a father of 4 daughters, I can't tolerate this. And it's like, well, what if you weren't, Matt?
Right.
Like, how does that have more weight to it now?
Yep.
You know? So that scene is really great. And, you know, and of course, like, I love like when the dean goes to call and Cassie's got the daughter's phone, you know, it's really great. And then the sequence after that immediately is her in the middle of that intersection where she's just sitting in the car and the redneck dude pulls up next to her and is like yelling at her because she's blocking traffic. And again, subverting expectations, gets out of the car with a tire iron and just starts smashing the shit out of his car. And he's like, you're crazy, and just rides away. So always, you know, changing the expectations. Let's talk about the scene with Madison, played by Allison Brie, who was a fellow college student during this time who saw and knew what happened to Nina. How did you, because I've heard some critiques about this one. How did you guys feel about that scene?
Do you mean as far as what she did to her?
What she does to Madison.
I loved it.
I was going to say, cinematically, I love, and story-wise, I love it. In reality, I'm like, because you don't know what actually happened until the end.
Right.
But I love the way that she is able to really mess with their minds. I mean, everybody except for, well, I guess you could even say she does with the attorney, but she's able to play with people and prey on them by getting into the insecurities. Right.
Right.
So, you know, she called her numerous times. I think it was up to like 13 voicemails she had left where she wanted to know what happened because she was in this room with somebody she didn't know, didn't know what happened, really couldn't tell what was going on. And even as an audience member, you're watching like, is she paying this dude to rape her?
You're right.
What the fuck is going on? Because again, when she goes to the attorney's house, she gets back in the car and that creepy looking guy is out there and intentionally looking creepy.
Yes.
And he asked her, like, do you want me to go in the house now? And she's like, no. Do I still get paid? Yeah. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
And you realize, okay, well, this guy passed her test, so there wasn't a need to punish him any further. You know, she forgave him.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the way it was done, because especially with setting it up with the ginger ale versus the champagne.
Right.
But getting this person to admit, once they drop their guard, admit that they just didn't give a shit about what took place and about what happened.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I think that's part of what Cassie is looking for, is just somebody to not only acknowledge what happened to Nina, but also say it didn't matter, or I didn't care. And so, yeah, putting Madison in the situation, and sort of one of the conversations I had with one of our movie critic friends was, you know, doesn't that mean she's just as bad as Al because she put that woman in that situation? And sort of, isn't that the same thing? And I don't agree with that, because I think she's trying to get them to admit. And I think she's like, the only way I can get through to Madison is to make her feel the panic that Nina felt. Nina was drunk to the point, you know, it's implied Nina is drunk to the point she doesn't remember what happened to her, but she's got bruises. There's evidence on Nina that an assault, a rape happened, where Madison doesn't have that, but she can't remember what. She just wakes up in the room with this good looking dude and was like, oh shit, what happened?
Right.
So I think Cassie's whole point is like, she just wants not only their acknowledgement, but also to somebody to say just something that I don't care, which is what's so interesting then when we get to the lawyer. So should we jump into that now, or do you guys have
let me comment on this really fast.
Sure.
So this is, I thought I had 2 problems with this film, but I have 3. So this is my third problem with the film. There's no reason for this guy. This guy is here to fuck with the audience watching the film, and that's it. She could have 100% trashed this woman, helped her up to the room, laid her on the bed. Like, you could even do a scene where she's filling a condom with something to make it look like sperm, and throws it on the bed. Sure. And you would wake up, you'd have no idea what the fuck's going on, where you are, how you got into this hotel, and there's a fucking condom there.
Yeah.
Like, that's terrifying, but she's not in any danger. I have a problem believing that Cassie can trust a man alone with a passed out woman, no matter who the fuck they are.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Because she's proven to herself time and again, dudes are going to let you down.
She has a notebook with hundreds of tallies.
Right. No, that's a good point. So then
I just think she could have fucked with her in a different way. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
I also don't think that the guy matters at the lawyer that you're about to talk about. I think that it would have been fine without him. I think that
the creepy dude.
Yeah. Outside of the lawyer's house. I think that he serves no purpose other than to fuck with the audience and make us think something.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
But with the lawyer, she goes to the lawyer that essentially got Al, the rapist, off for that, you know, that nothing happened. And he goes into with Cassie, like Cassie confronts him, and when he gets there, he's basically ready for her.
Right.
He's been just waiting saying, like, yeah. He was like, I knew this day would come. This is my reckoning. And she was like, well, your office told me where you lived and said you were on sabbatical. And he said, yeah, well, I told them if anybody called looking for me to send them here.
Right.
And then as she begins to recount the story, she's assuming he doesn't remember Nina. And of course he does.
Right.
And this is the moment that I think she gets some satisfaction in that somebody did care, that he does feel guilty, to the point he had a psychotic break over what he had done, not just to Nina, but to other girls. And this is the scene where he goes into people, we were paid bonuses for settling, or, you know, if we got, you know, proved that if we could prove these guys didn't do it, we looked into the girls' past to kind of bring their character into question. So and he just obviously feels extremely guilty about it. That I think then this scene is sort of, you see this a little bit of a shift, and this goes into the movie lulling you into this false sense of security. Mm-hmm. That you see the shift in Cassie, that, okay, he feels guilty about it. I'm getting she's starting, I think, to feel like some closure, that she can finally let this go.
Right.
And at the same time, she's begun this relationship with Ryan, who we really haven't gotten into yet. Ryan, played by Bo Burnham, who is a former classmate at the medical school, who goes to the coffee shop she's working at, and they begin this flirtation and relationship that allows her, again, she is like, oh, maybe he really is a nice guy. So between, I feel like the Alfred Molina character and then beginning a relationship with Ryan, she's feeling like things are going to be okay.
Right. And even with going back to the attorney,
yeah,
all I could think about with that was the numerous examples, the real world examples where this has taken place, whether it's Penn State, whether it's Baylor. I'm gonna implicate the wrong schools in a few more, but
I think you can name any school and be right.
Okay, LSU. Recently, you've got all these schools that have been embroiled in, we may have covered something up, or we didn't take it as seriously. And even under the Obama administration, there was that push for schools to actually investigate these things. And I think they might have put it under Title IX as far as investigating sexual assault, claims or even incidents of sexual, and report them, right? So what ended up happening was a lot of schools, and again, I'm just going to be vague about this. A lot of schools were way underreporting because their philosophy was, if we get the numbers that are there, it's going to appear as though they're too high for our students to feel comfortable, or our female students to feel comfortable, or female prospective students to feel comfortable in coming here. So we'll underreport. And in some cases, you had schools that were saying, we've had zero incidents.
Lies.
And myself and other people said, that's complete bullshit.
Right.
You've got more than one.
Yeah.
The goal is to have none. In an ideal world, we would have no sexual assaults that take place, in our school campuses or anywhere for that matter. But saying you have zero means that you pressured people, either directly or indirectly. You pressured people to not report. You pressured people not to come forward in the sake of, or the name of, making your school look okay. Or you have bullshit investigations that have the accuser in the same room with the accused, or the victim in the same room with the assailant, to give their deposition at a closed meeting. And then when everyone comes out, it's like, well, we decided there's not enough evidence to proceed with our star quarterback who's accused of raping a couple of women on campus, or, star basketball player, or whatever it is, right? Or a member of the faculty. But it revealed the way that so many people have worked. And that's one of the problems I have with NCAA sports. There's so much money invested into it that when you have people who commit a crime or an act like this, that it becomes an issue of protecting the institution rather than protecting the victim.
Right.
And that's what you had with this attorney. It was, he got so caught up in, we've got to protect this institution. It was to hell with any victims that are out there. If they hadn't had this picture on their Facebook page or their Friender page for the movie, they hadn't had this picture of them drinking or in a bikini, or, going out to this frat party, because you know what, ladies, if you go to a frat party, you know what that means, right? Whatever bullshit excuses that they give, that they would push this idea that it is definitely the woman's fault, to the point where so many people are accepting of that that you can end up having someone not question on what they did 30, 40 years ago or 10 or 15 years ago, because that was a different time and the standards were different. When the standards for rape and sexual assault have been the same for generations. It's the way that we have prosecuted them and actually pursued people who have committed those acts that have changed. Right. And as far as I'm concerned, if your big fear is I'm gonna get accused of sexual assault, then maybe you need to rethink your choices in life.
Right.
Because guys who haven't done it and aren't really worried about it. I'm sure 100%. There's always this I'm sure there's always this worry of, I'm more worried about I was awkward to somebody or I said something that could have been taken the wrong way. And then I sit there thinking about it like, oh shit, I didn't mean to say this to so-and-so. I hope they didn't take it the wrong way. Right. More so than I'm worried about, I was at the bar the other day and this girl was looking at me and I bought her some drinks and we went up to my room. I hope she doesn't change her mind and say I raped her.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No, that's what happens. So, so now, Cassie's met with the lawyer and she's begun the relationship with Ryan. And so then again, because this movie has lulled you into this false sense of security between the colors and the pop music and sort of these setups that you're like, oh, and now things are going to turn for her. It's going to be okay. She's finally met the nice guy.
Yeah, even have a cute sing-along.
And they have the cute sing-along to Paris Hilton's Stars Are Blind in the pharmacy. And, to the point that she even invites him to her home for dinner to meet her parents, who are just thrilled that she's like got a friend and that, there's this glimmer of hope in the both of them, especially with her dad, which I think she has such a sweet, wholesome relationship with her dad. Like, it's such a dad thing of like, he wants her to be okay, but he doesn't know how to interact with her.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That there's just this sweetness between them. That I think there's such a nice relief on his face. Like when Ryan comes over to dinner and he's like, oh, he's funny. And mom appears very medicated. I'm not sure what to do with mom.
I've seen the American Pie films. I know how much she is. So. No, I was just thinking about her and her dad though. And I kind of wish there had been some little scene, like maybe she's talking to Ryan or whoever, where even her mom, like if she just mentions like, there are nice guys out there and like looked at her dad, like, yeah, we get that feeling that she knows that he's a good guy. Right. Yeah. But I would like something solidified. I would like to know that Cassie believes there are actually good guys out there.
Yeah. Well, because I think I loved the scene because I think it's so sweet when she does go out to lunch with Ryan for the first time. Mm-hmm. And she's walking out the door and he calls her back and he's like, you look very pretty, honey. And she's like, thanks, Dad. Like, I think it was it's such a sweet moment.
It is.
And it's so pure and wholesome, which we haven't seen that out of Cassie because she's been so hard and like no fucks given pretty much all through, that it was just so nice to kind of see that like, oh, okay, she does have a bit of a softer side. And it's just very sweet because like I said, I'm a woman over 40 and I still have those moments even with my dad. If he says something like that to me, where he's like, oh, you look really nice, or you look very pretty today. It's just like, oh, thanks, Dad. It's just, there's a sweetness to it.
Yeah. No, I think that it would really solidify why she gives Ryan a chance. Yeah. Because without that, giving Ryan a chance doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Like the first thing he does is hit on her. Like, that should be a giant red flag for her. Yeah. And we're supposed to just kind of write it off that it's not. But I think that her dad is the key to that. Yeah. I think knowing that her dad's a good guy, and I'm using these terms very vaguely. I don't really mean anybody's good or bad, but like fully. But I think that she needs that. I think she needs that foundation of I know it's possible. I know it's out there. And even if she's not looking for a relationship, I kind of would have liked to see a date where it fails. Like a date where not a date. I used totally the wrong fucking word. I'm not even going to edit it out just to prove how fucking stupid that was. But what I mean is when she gets taken home from a bar, right? Like I would like one scene where someone just left her on the couch and like tucked her in and left.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, just anything where, and this isn't to like exonerate men. It's just, I would like to know that Cassie knows it's possible.
Sure.
Does that make any sense?
It does. And I think that's why she does wind up giving Ryan a chance, because I think she gets that glimmer of hope with the lawyer, of just him just acknowledging what had happened.
Yeah.
I think allows her, because I mean, because before that, Ryan had already hit on her. I think maybe at that point they had already had the first date, but then she gives him a second chance, because on that first date, he kind of fucks up where he's like, oh, we're at my apartment. Do you want to come up for a drink?
Right.
And she's like, fuck this, like he's not a nice guy. But then I think she's like, well, maybe I should give him a second chance. And she does. But then of course that doesn't go quite the way we were hoping, or at least I was hoping. I think he said you called it pretty early on, and it's definitely there.
Hey, really fast. Would it have changed it for you guys if they were like 3 blocks from his apartment instead of in front of it, and he was like, my apartment's that way, and she said no, and then they continued on? Would that have changed it, like softened Ryan more for you and not made him such a walking red flag?
You mean three blocks away, and she says no, but they continue walking to his apartment so he can go home,
or they something else. They go do something else.
I don't know. I mean, him drinking her spit in his coffee, like, really,
that's creepy as fuck.
that itself was kind of like,
But also, I think there's the red flag when he was like, oh, we went to med school together.
Right.
So they've got a past history. She just doesn't remember him. And him kind of being like I always had a crush on you thing, weird. I think is definitely sort of a very early red flag. But again, we've been taught through romantic comedies that, this is so sweet. He remembered me. He sent me 12 messages on Instagram, like,
and Twitter and Facebook.
So we get into that to the point that then, so you kind of see these moments of like, she's not doing that. She's in the relationship with Ryan. You kind of have the whole romantic montage with the Paris Hilton song. Mm-hmm. And then Madison shows up on her doorstep. And then you do see some remorse out of Cassie here too, where she's like, I should have called you. I'm so sorry. Nothing happened, and just reassures her. And then this is when we sort of get this bombshell of Madison saying, I've kept all my own phones. There's a video of what happened that night with Nina, and gives her the phone. And she watches the video against Madison's advice. Madison's like, I wouldn't watch it. And basically Madison's like, here, this is what you want. Never contact me again. We're done. And Cassie watches the video, and it's what happened to Nina that night. And we hear Ryan's voice in the video. Mm-hmm. And so that then just shatters her, that now she's allowed herself to be vulnerable. She's allowed herself to open up and be in this relationship with a nice guy. She's stopped because after the interaction we talked about earlier with Paul, she stopped going to bars. She's giving this relationship a shot, and he's known all along what happened. Right. Or was there. And so she goes and confronts him about this, obviously breaks up with him, but also knows that Al, the rapist, who has just sort of been on the fringes of the story the whole time, we haven't heard a lot about him other than what the dean has said, is that he's a successful doctor. He's marrying a bikini model. Like he's living his best life. She knows there's going to be a bachelor party. So she says to Ryan, you're going to tell me where this is and we're done. Well, and go ahead.
I was going to say, even before that, she knows about it because Ryan even mentions it earlier. It's like,
that's right.
These old guys are, still doing whatever, right? But she, starts following or starts stalking or however you want to describe it. I just call it researching. Researching them through Friender, right? And knows that the thing is coming up, and so she's going to keep an eye on it. And she makes the conscious decision: I'm deleting this app so I don't have to see it. So I don't feel compelled to participate or confront them or anything like that. But like you said, when the revelation comes about Ryan through the video, she's like, no, fuck it, I'm doing this. Yes. I'm going through with it.
Yeah. And so she goes out to the party, to the bachelor party, dressed again in this candy-colored wig and bubble gum and these nails that are all different color, like different Skittles, and is dressed as the sexy nurse. So she's going to be the stripper for the party. Mm-hmm. And she gets out there, and of course it's like this cabin in the woods kind of scenario. And when she gets there, all the guys are like, oh, who hired her? I'm going to be in so much trouble. Oh my God, you guys. And of course, nobody fesses up to it because nobody did hire her, but they're like, hey, a stripper's here.
But that is such a great reason for no one to know, because that would 100% happen.
Sure.
The who hired her? Oh, not me.
Yeah. Such a dude thing.
Yeah, they even call out who was it? Jeff or John? I can't remember his name. They call it like, "Oh, did you do this, man? I'm going to get in so much trouble."
Yeah.
And they all kind of like, "Oh, it must be him."
Yeah. And so she is just sort of like, all right, everybody on your knees. And they're like, oh, yes, ma'am, And she takes a bottle of vodka and just pours it, just walks through the line of these guys, just pouring vodka down their throats. Mm-hmm. And then she, puts Al in the chair and sits on his lap and starts talking to him. And he was like, oh, my fiance wouldn't approve of this. And she's like, well, we got to go upstairs now. And he was like, oh my God, I'm going to get in so much trouble, And so she just whispers, she was like, look, I don't get paid if we don't go upstairs. We don't have to do anything.
Right.
So again, some of these things she's learned, now she's applying. And so she takes him upstairs, handcuffs him to the bed. And he's sort of like, oh, is this necessary? And she's like, oh, well, it's for my safety, and now we're kind of getting to, the real revenge part of this.
Can I just say she was 100% right about that being for her safety?
Oh, yeah. And, when he asks, so he's sort of trying to make small talk with her, and he's like, oh, what's your name? And she says, Nina. And he just becomes pale, and he was like, no, you're not. She's like, why can't my name be Nina Fisher? And he was like, well, because she's dead, and she's like, well, and so then just reveals who she really is, goes into everything that happens, that then they get into just this huge confrontation. He, and please interrupt if I'm missing anything. He's able to break free from his handcuffs, and they struggle and fight, and he puts a pillow over her face. And and kills her, which was not sort of the way I thought this movie was going to go.
I mean, that's the jaw drop moment, right? When she dies.
Yes.
That's the moment. I love that. And she's knocked out everybody downstairs. I don't know if he said that or not.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's true. When she gives him
there's nobody there to help him.
Right. Because he does when the sort of the confrontation begins, he starts screaming for help. And she's like, oh, they're knocked out. You don't think I know how to drug a drink? You know, so obviously she had put something in the vodka and when she, you know, so they're out. And yeah, she dies. Again, going back to sort of the crucifix moment, because when his buddy, it's Max Greenfield from New Girl. What's that character's name? Is it
Joe.
Jeff?
No, that was Joe, I believe.
Okay. I knew it was like some typical white guy.
You can just call him Frat Bro. I think Frat Bro's a good name for him.
Chad might have been a better choice, but anyway.
Chad, Kyle,
or Brett. You could have named him Brett.
Yeah. But again, she's in that Christ-like pose on the crucifix where her arms are splayed out, but her feet are crossed. And Joe comes in the room and Al's crying. And of course, like, I killed her, man. I killed her. And he's like, oh, she's not dead. And he's like, you know, he's doing the sweetheart. Come on, get up. Come on, honey. You got to go. And then takes the pillow off her face, which I think is great. We don't see her face. Takes the pillow off and like throws it. And he was like, holy shit, dude, is she dead? And Al's like, yeah, man, that's what I've been trying to tell you. You know, so then it becomes, you know, like every 90s bachelor party movie. Where
now even mentions that because I deeply thought of
Very Bad Things.
Very Bad Things. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where they killed the stripper by throwing her up against the wall.
Yes. And so, you know, Joe is definitely the guy that has helped Al with his shitty behaviors over there. Like, you know, she left, man. We didn't see her again. You know, she did her thing and she left. We don't know who she was. You
didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, you didn't do anything wrong, man. And take her out to a field, get rid of her body, like burn her body. Not just get rid of it, but...
This guy's really going to the next level of help.
Yeah. I'm like, Joe, you've definitely done this before. You're a little too quick with handle this.
That was my thought. I was like, how many people has Joe gotten rid of? Because he is prepared. It's like he came to this bachelor party like, hey, if we got to kill anybody, I already got... the shovels, and I got the lighter fluid.
Well, he even knew how to stack the wood, which I was impressed by.
And you know what? None of this is one of my problems.
He got his badge in Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But none of this is one of my problems with the film because I 100% believe that Frat Boy would do this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So then... as all of this is happening, then we, you know, sort of fast forward to the moment of Joe or Al's wedding. And as they're taking the photos and everything, you hear these police cars come up. And like in the meantime, like Cassie's parents have reported her missing. They've gone and talked to Ryan. Like
when they talk to Ryan, like he straight out like just fucking throws her under the bus.
Sure.
Yeah.
He is just saving his own ass and
for sure. And the cops show up to arrest Al because she believes now, at least in the lawyer, that she sends him the phone that Madison gave her that shows the rape of Nina. And basically says, if something happens to me, this is where I went. This is what I was there for.
Right.
And so the police show up and arrest Al for the murder of Cassie. It's not for the rape of Nina, which I'm sure statute of limitations, that's long gone. Well, and he was exonerated for it. Right. So, But yeah, that's what he's arrested for, is the rape of Cassie, because then you see the police out there where the bachelor party happened. They find her necklace in the ash pile. That, so Joe didn't do that good of a job.
Right. And it's very clearly visible too. Like Joe should have really followed up on that.
Yeah. They should have done one last sweep. But
I do love how he goes running.
Yes.
In the cop show.
So great.
It's so like over dramatic. It's so like
that's when you just turn around and walk. You
just
turn around and start walking like, oh, let me go get some champagne over here.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, what is going on?
My phone's ringing. I gotta take this call, guys. In the woods.
No, it is like, Forrest Gump running out of the house after Mama dies.
I mean, he could easily work out a deal. Joe could easily work out a deal, because what did he do? And I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but what he did was basically, it was a legal disposal of human remains. I can't remember what the actual legal term is, but that's what he did, which isn't that serious as murder. So he could have easily gone to the cops and said, he came to me and said that but I need immunity. What did you do? It's like, well, I was worried. I was scared. He killed her. I thought he was going to kill me. Oh no. And then you're Scott. I'm not giving anybody legal advice. Any listener to the Necronoma.com. I don't want you to use this as legal advice in the future. You kill somebody, then use that as your, the way to. He's like, Your Honor, obviously.
Yeah.
Your Honor, this co-host of this podcast I listened to said.
And he's a historian and an educator, so I figured he knew what he was talking about.
He knew what he was talking about.
You knew what he was talking about, man.
He even gave a TEDx.
And Ryan, who is at the wedding, gets sort of a final message, mess with you, fuck you, from Cassie. She's got a scheduled message that goes out to him. And then we end with the glorious Juice Newton song, Angel of the Morning, which just made me so happy because I love Juice Newton. So,
I want to talk about my number one problem with this film.
Okay. All right, go for it.
My number one problem is that she trusts the lawyer. All the lawyer did was apologize and accept his punishment, right? There's no reason to believe he's going to go further than that.
Well, I think she believes, and this was one of the critiques one of my critic friends said, that his problem with that ending and sort of that is she hasn't trusted the justice system the whole time, and her whole plan at the end hinges on believing that the justice system's going to do the right thing.
Yep.
Now, I think even having to trust the lawyer, because I think she believes he wants to make this right so bad. I think she just trusts that, he's going to do that. And you're right. That is sort of a big ask. But I also
here's the other part of this. There's no way at her age, in the time that we live in, she hasn't seen the Shawshank Redemption and seen how Andy Dufresne did this by mailing it before he went where he had to go. So she could have mailed it. And on top of that, her dad worked at Shawshank. So, I mean...
I'm sitting here saying he's going to do it. He's going to do it.
You knew I had to. But really, that would make more sense.
He was also going to turn into a Krabby Patty. So,
Exactly. But can you imagine if she had left this evidence in like the house mail, and you just get like dad mailing it with some other stuff, having no idea what he's mailing, and then that goes to where it needs to go instead of trusting this lawyer? That's a very weak link to me. I don't feel like she knows him enough. I don't feel like they have that rapport and that she can trust this. But I will agree, it's weird that she trusts in the system at the end, but it's weird from a movie point of view. A real life point of view, at the end of the day, we will almost always try to trust the system to come through for us.
Sure.
No matter how much shit I talk about police or anything else, there are points in my life where I have to believe that they can help me.
Right.
I don't want to, and I have a lot of issues with it, but I still have that I have to because that's the right way to do it. So from a movie point of view, I don't like that she trusts them. From a real life point of view, I think it makes perfect fucking sense. But I think there should have been a backup, like sending it to the papers or sending it to the wife to be or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think something to argue against you, James. Just
bring it on.
Briefly.
Let's go.
I mean, not in a major way. I could argue it kind of goes to what she was saying while she had Al strapped down to the bed, which was, oh, you didn't remember her name. And this is, again, one of those things to fuck with them where even I could see Al getting off on the charges, right? There's very little evidence that he did it. Because all the evidence has been disposed of. It's been burned. Like somebody did it. Can we argue that, Al did it? Can we argue that Joe did it? Not really. And all the guys at the fraternity, Jesus.
Yeah.
All the guys at the bachelor party could be like, no, I never saw him leave. The stripper left. Like it could have been some mountain man that did it. It also becomes this thing of, yeah, he could possibly get these charges dismissed. But I think for her perspective, it's at least it's letting them know that it wasn't done, even though she sends that text to Ryan, like, this is the end or whatever. I think it's to let you know that I'm gone, but this stain is going to be on you guys forever.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're talking about Nina or me.
Yeah, that's what I think is the point, that even if Al isn't convicted of the murder, it still ruined his life. It ruined his wedding day. Chances are the chick is not going to go back to him or forgive him for this. So it's done. I think in her mind, the justice is, you guys ruined my life with what you did to Nina. And I lived with that every day. So you know what, motherfuckers, here you go. You've got to live with this now for the rest of your life, because you obviously forgot and moved on with your lives from college. So now you're going to have to contend with this.
Yeah. And if the bongos didn't, ruin that marriage enough, I looked at my wife while we were watching that scene. I said, don't you get any fucking ideas, please. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. No. But no, I mean, in seriousness, yeah, I think for a viewer of this or someone who has had any moment that's close to sexual assault, molestation, anything like that, if you've experienced it, it stays with you forever. If it's happened to someone who's close to you, it stays with you forever. Mm-hmm. And the people that committed it, in a lot of times, and you see these excuses offered through the film, you see these excuses offered in so many different ways in the real world. They come up with excuses as to why it was okay for them to do what they did, so they don't have the guilt that's associated with it. To where, it could be, yeah, this girl came up to my room at 3 a.m. I didn't rape her. She knows what happens if she's coming up after 11. I mean, that's booty call time. Or, like all the other things that we've argued about are argued to explain what sexual assault is, and stating that it comes down to consent. Like if somebody is saying like no, or the terms have changed and that person is no longer agreeing to whatever arrangement that you had or anything like that, I don't even give a shit if you're paying someone for sex. If that person then says no, guess what? Anything you do after that point is sexual assault. Right. They don't have to give you the fucking money back. Right. And you don't have to say like, well, I paid you my whatever and I'm entitled. No, like you could have. No. But I think because so many people who commit these acts like to excuse their behavior. I don't even like calling it behavior. Like excusing what they committed. They find a way to live with whatever they did. Right. And people who've excused it find a way to live with how they enabled somebody to do the things that they did, whether that's, hey, I only drove the car, or, I was the dean of the school and we didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. When you probably did, it was just, I don't want to ruin this young man's life. And I love the choice of the title.
Yeah.
Whether that's the explanation or even the way it could be applied, because you can look at it this way. What if we flip it and say every woman that has had to deal with sexual assault, we define them as a promising young woman. You ruined them. Yes. As far as their career prospects, educational prospects, their life, because you have now had to make them live with this trauma their entire lives, as opposed to some piece of shit who decides that he is going to sexually assault someone and then act as though it didn't happen. It was in that person's mind or whatever, because they don't want their careers ruined because of an accusation.
Right.
No, your career is the thing that I worry about least when it comes to sexual assault in somebody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So here's another couple of arguments I've heard about this movie from our critic friends who did not like it.
We're just going out of our way to attack them today.
Do it.
And I feel like we've addressed this one, that, a lot of them are saying like this is a rape revenge exploitation movie, and actual rape revenge exploitations do it better. And I think we've already addressed this, but I don't view it as a rape revenge movie. I think, as we've said, it's a movie about trauma, and kind of satirizes the John Hughes movies that we've grown up on, and the teen comedies and the romances and stuff. So I think you could say it's a revenge movie, but I think it's much, much more with that. And I think it deals more, like we've already said, the trauma. Somebody also said, and this kind of annoyed me, where they were like, well, I get why you like the movie because you really don't like horror movies. But if you've seen horror movies, they do this differently or better. And again, I'm kind of annoyed by that because I am a horror fan. And I don't view this way. So I think in some ways they're missing a little bit of what this movie really is. So thankfully, we have helped them today. Right, James?
Well, it really comes down to how individualized everything is. Even what sexual assault is can be individualized. Like, somebody can tell someone else something that happened to them, and the person that had it happen could be the one who thinks, oh, that's kind of funny, I shouldn't have been in that position. And the other person can be like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you know what happened to you? Right. It doesn't always have to be the person it happened to who is the overly traumatized and no one else cares. It can actually be the other way around. It happened to me a lot as a case manager, where someone would be telling me like a horrific story that happened to them, and they presented like they thought it was funny. And I'm sitting here like, holy fuck, I'm traumatized listening to you,
Right.
And that goes into horror. I always say horror is an emotion and not so much a genre. It's a feeling, right? And I know it's a genre, but the reason that we pick a lot of the films we pick that aren't necessarily horror is that definition of the feeling and the emotion. And I think that if I don't know, Brock Turner and I sat down and watched this film together, we would find different things horrific about it.
Sure.
You lost me at sit down with Brock Turner.
Well, that's just the trap, my friend. Anyway, but my point is, like, all of this is so individualized. So while I was picking on our critic friends, I don't necessarily disagree with them, because that's how it affected them. Right. And how it affects me is very different, or how it affects you, or how it affects any woman versus how it affects me, or how it affects whoever, right? And so I guess long way I'm trying to say is, I feel like we've kind of forgotten as a society that there isn't one answer. And that's what this movie set out to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a point that I've made on panels or discussions I've had with people, that it's all art, and art speaks to us and impacts us differently. So, I know we've kind of bagged on our critic friends, but I also, in the conversations I had with them about this stuff, it was very respectful. Like, I understand that's their perspective of this movie, and they are definitely entitled to that, just like I'm entitled to my opinion. So I think, the point comes down to is it all impacts us differently and helps us in different ways, which is the point. And so I kind of get more annoyed with people that tend to be the arbiters and the gatekeepers that are like, well, you shouldn't watch this movie or you should love this movie. It's like, no, however it speaks to me is how it speaks to me. And so if that's, James and you and I had a conversation about a tweet I put out this week about how I feel like Scream and Sidney Prescott saved me, which sometimes people are like, really? Scream, that slasher movie? And it's like, yes, but you don't understand what was happening in my life at that moment when I watched that movie. And so that's why I feel like you shouldn't make somebody feel lesser than for the art that they love, because you don't know what was happening to them in their life when that piece of art was made or when they viewed that and how it spoke to them.
Right.
I think that's so true with so much stuff. Like one of my favorite movies is Easy A. And everyone else is like, what's wrong with you? That's a throwaway teen comedy. But it really reflects kind of some stuff I went through in high school where rumors got out of hand and became this huge thing where I was literally suspended from school and like I had like cops called and different shit like that. And this is all a story for when we have a Patreon. And but so it's a movie that really speaks to my own experience, even though I went to high school, like 20 years before that film came out, but other people are always like, how can you consider Easy A one of the best movies ever made? And it's like, because it is for me,
Right.
And, and so, yeah, as much as we've made fun of our friends, I also know that they're all very open to discussing things.
Yes.
And what I like about having conversations with people who don't necessarily like the same things we do is that we get to explore these problems with things we like, or we get to see a different side of them, or we get to show them why we like it. Right. And I think that those conversations, while they're kind of throwaway because it's a movie, right? We're really saying a lot deeper shit at the same time.
Right.
And kind of exploring different worldviews, or like, you're not as liberal as me, but this is why I think this, or I don't agree with you on this, but this is your opinion. So now I at least understand why you think that way.
Right.
And I think the more that we can encourage shit like movies, games, whatever, like we're able to build that rapport and that trust to have the harder conversations as well. So I wanted to throw in why I think that that's so fucking important to do.
I agree.
One thing I would say about this film, and one thing to praise this film about, and we kind of talked about it earlier, but I like the idea, or at least I like the execution, that we understand that the film touches on the aspect of sexual assault and rape, right? But there's never a moment of a needless and gratuitous scene of rape in the film as part of character development or as part of backstory or anything like that. Because for me watching this, and probably for the two of you as well, since there is no mention of rape or sexual assault that's brought up, right, explicitly, it allows people that aren't that familiar with what it looks like in the real world, I mean, as far as people dealing with it and the aftermath of it, to understand what it looks like in the real world, where you have these rumors that are stated about someone, or the way that someone deals with the trauma and taking care. Like she even says, like, I dropped out to take care of my friend. Like she dropped out because of what happened to her. I dropped out to take care of her because we have been together like for life. And then you get this understanding, this tight connection between these two friends, because earlier you're like, well, why the fuck would you care this much about someone to the point where, the parents and Molly Shannon's character, who's Nina's mom, basically says, like, you need to move on. You need to forget all this. That's her mother saying this, the mother of the victim that's saying this.
Yes.
And it is great that we get that, because I think more people need to realize that you can have a film that talks about issues of incest, child molestation, rape, all these things that are here, without being gratuitous about it, because there are going to be a lot of people who don't need to see that, because they may be reliving their own trauma by seeing that, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's also the idea of you don't necessarily need to expose people to the physical act to get them to understand the pain and the emotional connection that comes with that. So I think that was great, a great choice on the filmmakers. 'Cause for me, the most disturbing thing in this film, physically, the most disturbing thing is when Cassandra gets killed.
Yes.
Because I'm sitting there like, fuck, this is there's no blood, but it is a brutal scene.
Yes.
Where he's smothering her with that pillow. And it's not one of these, what we've seen in a lot of movies where it's like 5 seconds and the person's dead. No, like you see her fighting, struggling. You hear her screaming under the pillow. You hear him grunting. You hear all this, and you're sitting there like, holy shit. Like this is probably the scariest, most brutal thing in this film that they could do. And they did it the right way.
Yeah.
They didn't do it in a comedic way where it was, I mean, even when he's dealing with it the next day and he's like, I killed her, man. Like I couldn't bring myself to laugh. You know, I mean, that was a very goofy deliverance of that line, right? He's like, oh man, I killed her. You know, because his voice is very whiny and things like, and even his friend Joe, when he comes in, he's like, no, man, she left in the morning. You just get more angry at how willing they are to throw this woman away.
Yes.
To save themselves.
Well, did you guys watch the TV show Succession?
No.
I've seen parts of it, but I've not watched the whole thing.
Okay. It's like a Rupert Murdoch-esque family. They're just insanely rich and can buy off. But there's something that happens in one of the seasons where they're like, don't worry about it. It's an NRP. It's a no real person involved, which has become their legal term for when something happens to somebody. It's a person that does not matter.
Okay.
You know, and so they talk about that a lot in that show. And this is that same attitude that Al and Jeff have. They're in this sort of upper class, sort of privileged white guy thing that, she doesn't matter.
Yeah, she's just a stripper, man. I mean,
nobody's going to come looking for her, you know, and not just fully understanding there are people that are going to come looking for her, and your life is going to be, I don't know if ruin's the right word. I like the word stain. This is going to stain the rest of their life. They're always going to have this in their life because of the choices she made prior to that happening.
Yeah. I do have to say this, because we've talked about the whole alcohol. I mean, even then they those are those guys that would use that type of excuse. But I felt I had to come back to it, but because some people might need to have it beaten into their head. Alcohol is not an excuse for any of this type of behavior, any of these actions. Absolutely. For me, a bad choice involving alcohol is I bet a little bit too much money in Vegas.
Yep.
Or I ordered some shit off of Amazon, and 2 days later, I'm like, when the fuck did I order this? You know, it's those are excusable. Oh, I was drinking. I can't believe I did that. Not being assaulted by somebody and not assaulting someone.
Well, I don't think even in an inebriated state, you're not going to do something outside of your character.
Right.
You know, so it's that thing of like, you know, people who are like, oh my God, I was hypnotized and I did this. And it's like, well, I don't know if it's within you to do that, you know? And so same with alcohol, it just kind of maybe loosens you up, and you order shit off of Amazon, or you spend a little too much at the casino, or, you know, whatever. But I don't believe you would necessarily do something that's not within who you already are.
Right.
I agree. I also think that the other side of that is you don't have to drink alcohol to justify your actions. Yep. I've known a lot of people who, I want to go out with this guy and I want to unwind, so I'm going to drink a lot first. And it's like, if you're going to make these choices, make them sober. Like, be in control of it. You can go have sex. You can go do whatever. You can kill people, apparently. I see it all the time in the news, but like, be responsible for your choices. Don't just don't try to write it off as alcohol before you even started drinking. That's always been a very odd thing to me, and I see it a lot. So anyway, I don't have anything left in my notes. Do either of you?
No, I hit everything on there. Of course, before we go to the film selections, I do want to offer this. Because we've been talking about sexual assault itself, and of course we also talked about Nina's death, which I guess is alluded to that it was suicide. I want to offer these two sources for people to contact. You may not need them, but somebody may need them. So there's RAINN, rain.org, RAINN.org. It stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Their phone number for the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 1-800-656-HOPE. So they are there to assist people in providing a lot of resources. There's also the National Suicide Hotline, Suicide Prevention Hotline, and that's 800-273-8255. Write it down, keep it on your refrigerator, keep it saved in your phone contacts. Because again, you might not need it, but you may know someone or come into contact with someone who does need that information. And that's what I got there.
Cool.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. We actually keep it like just hung up in our house. And I've worked a couple places where we just hang it up because you never know who's going to need it. And especially if you have teenagers or anything like that, hang these numbers up in your house. If you're in the U.S., obviously. If you're anywhere else, look up the local numbers for where you are. But I'm a real big believer that teens might not want to talk about it and they might not want to tell you, but make sure they have access to it and they know it's out there and that they can get to it if they need to.
Oh, I lied. I did have one more thing.
My God.
No,
it's the end of the world.
Keeping in the same vein. It also, for any of us that anybody who's listening who is an educator, I think one of the best things that any of us can do is advocate for the inclusion of consent in sex ed courses, or just consent in general, not necessarily in the sex ed courses, because unfortunately so much weight has been put on women and young girls with respect to defining what consent is, or having their consent revoked over the way that we've kind of, as a culture, have argued that, no, yes means yes and no means maybe, for so many years. So I think it's important because we've had those films that have taught us, unfortunately, that it's not rape if the woman enjoys it, or it's if she doesn't say no, it doesn't mean no. So I think it's important for educators, people in religious institutions, any public servants, because you have so much more access to people to explain what consent, to first learn what consent is, and then to educate others on consent as well, because there's a lot of catching up to do with that, to where we can finally get beyond the whole she was asking for it because X, Y, Z.
Yep.
Very good. All right, let's jump into films you would recommend if people liked Promising Young Woman. So, Shelly, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, I think to kind of help maybe satisfy the people that want to look at a more traditional exploitation rape revenge movie, I would recommend Thriller, A Cruel Picture from 1973. This is about a young woman who is abused and then exacts her revenge in a way that's pretty satisfying. So if that's what you're looking for, and then this is the movie to watch. And then I heard a comparison of Promising Young Woman to American Psycho, which I am a big fan of, from the year 2000, directed by Mary Herron, which is also, I mentioned it earlier, a satire of 80s excess and has a wonderful female gaze upon Christian Bale, who is really fucking hot in this movie. So, but I think I did think that comparison was interesting of Promising Young Woman to American Psycho. So now I kind of want to watch them back to back as a double feature. So I'm going to do that. So maybe somebody out there will join me.
Sweet. Okay. So next time you come on the show, does that count since there's a P in one of the words of the title?
If we do Psycho, American.
I told you it has to be the silent P next time.
Yeah.
So. All right. My movies. Heathers, number one.
Yes.
I think Heathers is just a phenomenal film. It's one of the films I consider almost perfect. There's a couple problems with it, but for the time, just phenomenal. Hard Candy. Hard Candy is all about what happens after sexual assaults and how trauma continues and how it can affect people who are not involved at all. I don't want to give much more away. And then my final choice, one of my favorite films I saw this year, Moxie. Moxie is just fucking great, and everybody should watch it. And I'm just going to start saying Moxie even when it doesn't match the movie I'm talking about, and then people will see it. No.
That's a good choice. Getting back to Hard Candy, I just recently talked about Hard Candy on a BS Movies episode. We did revenge movies.
Oh, nice.
And I rewatched and talk about Hard Candy on that. So that's a great choice.
Excellent. All right, Don, what do you got?
All right. Do you want all 500 or?
Let's keep it down to like 49 today.
Okay. 49. All right. I had to start off because this was the comparison a lot of people were giving when this movie came out. Is the series I May Destroy You from starring Michaela Cole. I care a lot. And some of these have to deal with female agency, not necessarily with the concept of sexual assault. Kill Bill, I have to throw that one in there. Volume 1, not Volume 2. Volume 1. North Country, which talks about, oh my gosh, now I forget. Charlize Theron stars in it. And it has to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace. And it was actually one of the first class action cases of sexual assault, or charging a business with sexual assault and discrimination. Also starring Charlize Theron, Monster. Mm-hmm. 3 Billboards, and of course I forgot the rest of the title, but 3 Billboards with
outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yes, thank you. I was like, wait, what was the name of the town?
3 Billboards and a Funeral.
Yes. Yeah. I'm surprised James didn't bring in Ready or Not on this one. On the show, we mentioned Last House on the Left. Mm-hmm. And then this one won't make sense at first, but hear me out. 9 to 5.
I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay,
yeah, that makes sense.
Some people look at it as like, why would it be that? It's like, historically, it includes a lot of things with respect to women entering the workplace and having to face with sexual harassment and rumors, especially with the rumors that are there about Dolly Parton's character, that she's sleeping with the boss and that's how she's getting ahead. And she gets separated or segregated from the other women in the office because they feel that she's doing these things. And then when she complains about it, he gives the excuse of, well, you came to that conference with me. You knew what was going on. She's like, no, that's not what's going on here. And then I would have to include as my last two, Gone Girl, because of the psychological element as far as playing someone so well. And then Mad Max Fury Road, another, I guess I'm on a Charlize Theron kick with this list. With female empowerment and actually standing up to patriarchal structures and fighting against this idea of men controlling women's bodies, which is basically what the whole film is about.
Yeah.
I love it. Good list.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So let's bring this back to you, Shelly. You want to tell people where to find you online, how to listen to your couple podcasts, and,
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Shelly BS Movies. And I, again, am the co-host of BS Movies podcast that's available on all your platforms. And my new venture, Cine Sirens with Andrea Canales, also available where you find your podcast. So please like and subscribe those, give us a follow, and let us know what you think.
Very cool. All right. So I guess that wraps it up for this week. Thank you once again for joining us. This was your third time, and that's like, third out of 30 or so. We'll keep bringing you back constantly. So no, we love anytime you're on here. So thank you for coming again.
Oh,
you're always welcome on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will hopefully see you here next week at thenecronama.com.